I've always been drawn to the unknown. From the eerie legends of ancient folklore to the chilling stories of modern cryptids, my fascination with the unexplained led me to become a professional cryptid hunter. My name is Jason Carter, and this is the story of my most harrowing investigation. A search that spiraled into an abyss of terror I could never have imagined. It began with a letter. Not just any letter, but one that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. I was in my office, cluttered with maps, photographs, and equipment from previous investigations, when the letter arrived. It was unmarked, with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with a handwritten message. Help us. They're watching. The shadow beyond. 43621 North, 120.536 West. The coordinates pointed to a remote location in Oregon, far off the beaten path. It wasn't the first time I've received cryptic messages, but something about this one felt different, more urgent, more personal. The mention of the shadow beyond was intriguing. It wasn't a name I had encountered in any cryptid lore. It was as if someone was reaching out from the darkness itself. I decided to investigate. I arrived at the coordinates in late summer. The area was a vast expanse of dense forest and rugged terrain. I set up camp in a small clearing, surrounded by towering trees and a sense of oppressive quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being observed, a sensation that grew stronger with every passing hour. The first few days were relatively uneventful. I conducted standard procedures, setting up infrared cameras, motion detectors, and audio recorders. I scoured the forest for any signs of unusual activity, but found nothing. However, the unease lingered, gnawing at me. On the third night, things took a turn. I was reviewing footage from my infrared cameras when I noticed something disturbing. A shadowy figure, barely discernible, seemed to move in and out of the frame. It wasn't like any known cryptid. It was more an amorphous darkness, shifting and pulsating as though it were alive. The figure appeared to be moving deliberately, avoiding the cameras, which made my pulse quicken. I decided to follow the path it seemed to take, deeper into the forest. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing only the gnarled trees and tangled underbrush. As I ventured further, the forest grew eerily silent, the usual sounds of wildlife conspicuously absent. After several hours, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. It was weather-beaten and covered in vines, looking as though it hadn't been touched in decades. Despite its dilapidated state, it exuded an unsettling aura. I felt drawn to it, as if it held answers to the mystery of the shadow beyond. Inside the cabin, I found remnants of an old journal. The pages were yellowed and brittle, and the handwriting was barely legible. It spoke of a group of explorers who had ventured into this very forest decades ago, searching for something they never found. The entries became increasingly frantic, mentioning strange shadows and a growing sense of dread. One entry caught my eye. "We are not alone. The shadow beyond watches us. It feeds on our fear, growing stronger. We must leave before it consumes us all." The journal was a chilling testament to the horrors that might lie hidden in this forest. The more I read, the more I felt that the shadow beyond was not just a cryptid but a malevolent entity, something far darker than I had ever encountered. As I left the cabin, I heard a faint whispering, a chorus of voices murmuring in the distance. I followed the sound, which led me to an old, overgrown cemetery. The graves were ancient, and the headstones were eroded by time. The whispering grew louder, almost deafening, as if the voices were coming from the very ground. I set up my audio recorders and waited. The whispers became coherent, forming words: "Join us. Become one with the shadows." The sensation of being watched intensified. I felt a cold presence behind me, but whenever I turned, there was nothing there. My flashlight flickered, and the temperature dropped abruptly. I hurried back to my camp, my mind racing with fear. That night, I had nightmares. I dreamed of dark, shifting figures in a void that seemed to stretch into eternity. I woke up in a cold sweat, convinced that the shadow beyond was trying to invade my mind as well as my reality. The following days were marked by increasing strangeness. My equipment malfunctioned inexplicably, and the forest seemed to close in around me. I noticed patterns in the shadows that seemed almost deliberate, as if the darkness itself was conspiring against me. I decided to consult local folklore. The town nearby was small and wary of outsiders, but I managed to speak with an elderly woman who claimed to know about the shadow beyond. She spoke in hushed tones, her eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard. The shadow beyond is an ancient entity, she said. It was once worshipped by those who lived in these woods long ago. They believed it had the power to control and consume souls. It waits in the darkness, feeding on fear and despair. Those who seek it often find themselves lost to it forever. Her words were chilling. I realized that I might be dealing with something beyond the realm of conventional cryptid hunting. The shadow beyond was not just a creature, but a force of malevolence. As I prepared to leave, the shadow beyond made its final, most terrifying appearance. The forest seemed to warp and twist, the shadows growing longer and more menacing. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling. I ventured once more into the forest, driven by a mixture of fear and determination. The shadows seemed to ride and pulse around me, closing in. My flashlight failed completely, plunging me into darkness. I could hear the whispers clearly now, surrounding me, echoing in my mind. In the pitch black, I stumbled upon a hidden chamber, a cave hidden behind a thicket of trees. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols and markings. The whispers were louder here, almost deafening. I felt an oppressive presence, as if the shadow beyond was drawing nearer. I tried to document the symbols, but my equipment was useless. The cave seemed to close in on me, the darkness becoming a tangible force. Panic surged through me, and I fled, the whispers following me, growing louder and more frantic. When I emerged from the forest, I was disheveled and on the brink of collapse. I barely made it back to my car, the oppressive darkness still clinging to me. I drove away as fast as I could, my mind racing with fear and exhaustion. Back home, I tried to piece together what had happened. The footage and recordings were a chaotic jumble of static and incoherent noise. There was no clear evidence of the shadow beyond, only the unsettling sense that it had somehow followed me. I continued to experience nightmares and unsettling occurrences. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and I often felt watched, even in the safety of my own home. The whispers continued, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of perception. My fascination with cryptids has waned since then. The shadow beyond was not just a myth or a story. It was a reality, a force of darkness that defies understanding. Some mysteries are better left unexplored, and some shadows are best left in the dark. I've learned that the hunt for the unknown can lead to encounters with things far beyond our comprehension. As I look back on my experiences, I realize that the real horror lies not in the cryptids themselves, but in the dark, shadowy realms they inhabit. And sometimes the shadows come out to play. I don't know if I will ever be free of the shadow beyond. Sometimes in the quiet moments before sleep, I hear the whispers again. They are softer now, but they still call to me, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lies just beyond the edge of reality. If you ever find yourself drawn to the unknown, remember this. Some shadows are not meant to be explored. They are best left undisturbed, lurking in the darkness, waiting for their next victim. And if you receive a letter with coordinates to the unknown, think twice before you follow. The shadows are always watching, and once you've seen them, they never truly let you go.